Hey, Christian.
Welcome to another installment of the Geekscape Book Club. I, as always, am Christian Bladt, excited to speak with all of you about Wonder Woman by George Perez Volume One, which includes 14 issues of the 1987 George Perez and some other creators we'll discuss as well. But we're talking about this week as homage to the late great George Perez, who just passed away. With me again this week is Mr. Eric Connor. Hello, sir.
Hello.
And there's Diana right there. And
I raided my kid's toy bin, and
that's all right.
There was a couple of Wonder Women to choose from. So
that's a good one. Yeah,
you have
this one. Although, if you look closely at the face, it's a little amphibic.
Yeah, it almost looks like, for our audio listeners, you're just going to have to assume that it looks like Betty Boop. And of course, with us, as always, is our own Wonder Woman, the one and only Kaitlin Cornell. Thank you, Kaitlin, for being with us. And for people who need a reminder, the concept of the Geekscape Book Club is that these are legendary or well-known runs of comics that perhaps we should have read previous to this, but we haven't. And joining us is someone who has read this. In fact, he was the first person I asked for a recommendation for George Perez Wonder Woman work. My friend Jeff Winstead, who has a comic book of his own called The Alternate, which you can find, and also The Last Battle of the Revolution. So you're the author of that. And
that's good reading for this week.
Great reading for this week. Great reading for every week. Thank you, Jeff, for being with us.
Yeah.
And I'll sort of turn to you for a second and just let you take a moment and talk sort of about the context of this post-crisis series of Wonder Woman, which, by the way, I've mentioned you on the show in the past. Jeff is the person who gave me the inspiration for this show, because you knew that I had never read Crisis on Infinite Earths, so you mailed me the trade paperback, which actually Kaitlin has right now, my copy.
Awesome.
And get some mileage out of it. And then I sent you. I had to send it digitally, but I sent you Kitty Pryde and Wolverine because you had never read that.
That's
so that goes back to the sort of the early point of the pandemic. But that was the original genesis for this show, which we're happy to be doing now. So that being said, talk a little bit about Wonder Woman, the character, sort of right before Crisis, and the way that this series was viewed at the time, which I believe it premiered. It debuted in 1987.
That's right. So Crisis is actually a good thing to mention here because that's the impetus for this whole series. So DC was rebooting all their continuity ostensibly at the same time post-Crisis, which didn't actually happen as planned, which is one of the problems here. So Wonder Woman was a book had been published continually since the 40s. There was a reason they had to do that contractually, even if sales were bad, because if they didn't publish the book at least, I think, 4 times per year, there was a weird clause in the contract that the rights reverted back to William Marston's estate. So even when sales were bad, so 3 superhero books were published continually through the Frederick Wertham era when comics got such a bad name. It was Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. Not because Wonder Woman sold it all, but because they had to or lose the rights. So because of that, the book sales in the book were up and down. They had some great creators. Ross Andru of Spider-Man fame did a great run in the book. But they had some slow periods. And Wonder Woman, much like Superman, if you read an issue of Wonder Woman from like 1983, you may as well be reading an issue from 1953. Like there's something about it didn't move forward in time the way it should have.
Right.
And so it was sort of stuck there. So along comes Crisis. George Perez, for those who don't know, was doing a very, very popular book for DC at the time called New Teen Titans. He was pulled from that book to do Crisis on Infinite Earths, which was a multi-12-part miniseries that DC did to reset the continuity. And after that, he was given a choice. You come back to Titans, which he considered doing. For a little while, he bounced around. He did some covers. He inked the last Silver Age Superman story that Alan Moore wrote over Kurt Swan. and he is told that Wonder Woman's available if you want it. And he said no. So some time passed. He kept thinking about it. He started hearing rumors on where the book was going. Apparently, a writer had been hired. He was Greg Potter. And an artist had been hired by the name of Mark Beecham. And so I heard this story in a convention in Ohio in the mid-'80s. There was a Wonder Woman panel. They had several of the writers historically on the panel and an editor named Kevin Dooley. And Kevin Dooley told a story which to me seemed out of school, that Perez had heard that Mark Beecham was taking over the art on Wonder Woman, and he was so infuriated because Beecham, Christian, you might know him from, he did an issue of Spectacular Spider-Man that featured Black Cat, and he also did the famous annual that introduced Ace.
I do remember Ace. And
yeah.
Jeff, we are actually having that audio problem
sorry.
with you again. So I don't know if sitting still works. It did work when you popped out, so we might have you pop out and pop back in.
Okay.
But so he heard that this artist was doing it, and did he feel like, I can do it better? Is that the gist of it, though?
The gist of it was, he thought that artist was too racy. It would be it would sexualize Wonder Woman too much, and so he decided at that point to toss his hat in the ring.
Okay, well, let's actually have you pop out and see if you can come back with the audio sounding better. And sorry to kick you out mid-story, but I know that especially for our audio listeners that wasn't going to sound particularly great. Heading into this reading assignment, Kate, had you read much, if any, Wonder Woman before?
I haven't read any Wonder Woman before. And is my audio okay?
Your audio sounds great, especially compared to Jeff, but it also sounds great.
I hadn't read any Wonder Woman before. I read a little bit. I guess that's not true because I read a little bit when the first Patty Jenkins movie came out.
Sure.
But I hadn't read any of the old stuff. I read some of the new stuff to kind of, figure out where the character was coming from. And I honestly had a really hard time getting through this one. Like, I think I told you in text, I was just like, do you still want me on? Because I had a hard time. I restarted that first issue maybe 5 times, and I kind of gritted my teeth and did the first 5.
Well, yeah. And I think that, in a collected volume, that first issue, obviously it's kind of easier to just sort of plow through it and then move on to the story. But as a standalone issue, it's a little surprising because it's sort of, I'm talking about issue 1. The surprising thing about it, Jeff, is that it's sort of like the part of the Bible where it's a lot of like begats. It's like you're explaining a lot, and it is interesting background story to the characters and the situations. But as a tone setter for people who read superhero comic books, even in 1987, it's a little surprising. Kaitlin was mentioning that she had to start it several times.
It was one of those things, Jeff, where it was just like and what was weird was like we had read, our first episode was Batman Year One, which is very much like there was a lot of the talk bubbles and fit in. It was a lot. It was very, very condensed between the art and the writing.
Yeah.
But this one was like almost overly so, or I could barely even like see past, as opposed to like the writing and the art working together. It was like the writing was almost covering the art, and I couldn't really I think that's why I had such a hard time getting into it, because it was
as a quick follow-up to you, Kate, have you started reading Crisis on Infinite Earths?
I haven't.
Not because I'm trying to get the book back, but because that is, to me, some of the densest storytelling that I ever read, because there are so many characters. George Perez is the perfect artist for Crisis because he actually takes the time to draw everybody, and everybody looks great. And but there's so many words per page in Crisis, and it is definitely a very specific style, like a 70s and 80s style. In the 90s, everybody started trying to spread out the art a lot more and honestly have a lot less words.
I had the first major comic I read, like in modern times, what got me into comics again was young Loki, the Loki Agent of Asgard series.
Mm-hmm.
And the beginning of this comic book reminded me of how they started Loki, Agent of Asgard. So if you're a Marvel fan and you like Loki, I would highly recommend Agent of Asgard. It takes place after, evil Loki takes over, and it's basically like Frigga and this like council of women goddesses like resurrect Loki and like have him like fix his past person's mistakes.
Right.
But it did have that sort of feel of like this like overlord of goddesses that have been like bestowed.
There's
like race.
For me it was reminiscent just of various Thor runs that I read actually kind of at a similar time frame as this came out, and it seemed a little bit inaccessible. I don't know how much I would have liked it when I was 11 if I had bought it when it was new.
I'm 31 and it was hard for me.
But I think as a whole, I really liked that, and honestly, just George Perez's work I was most familiar with from his like late 70s Avengers work, but I'd obviously seen some Teen Titans and stuff. But this was really my first solo Wonder Woman story that I'd ever read. I had definitely read some like Justice League stuff. I'd seen her in things before, but I hadn't read it. What about you, Eric? Had you read much in the way of solo Wonder Woman stories prior to this week, basically?
Yeah, it's funny. I was gonna venture back into the dark place of my house where all these boxes are from my childhood home, and actually to that point, like look to see if I had Wonder Woman titles. I was always much more Marvel. Mm-hmm. And also, it's funny you brought up Thor, because I was thinking about Thor a little bit too, because I was always one of the reasons I always liked Marvel so much, and the titles I was really into were like X-Men, all the Spider-Man, Fantastic Four even. I always liked the sort of mixture of the real with the, fantastical, and the ideas of stories set in New York. When you grow up in the East Coast, there's something pretty exciting about that, especially when both my parents were from Brooklyn. So, the stuff about gods is always a little bit of a steep hill for me to climb as a reader. I don't think I'm sure I have at least one Wonder Woman comic in my collection somewhere, but it would not have been much. And it definitely, I never read like a series all the way through of Wonder Woman. And it's funny, Kate, you brought up like kind of how dense like the writing was. It might be a little hard to see for our limited video audience,
or for a video audience, you could kind of see. Yeah,
you can see there's like in this one page, there's a dozen panels.
Yeah, that's more of a product of this era, Jeff. Yeah. We were talking about how the 90s really, yes, a lot of it was because of the creators that went on to do Image Comics, but all of a sudden it was a lot more splash pages and honestly a lot less words, except for Chris Claremont, really, is what it seemed like. Right. But so there is a lot per page, but I want to let you finish your thought, Eric.
Yeah, but I it's funny you bring up the first issue. It's hard to imagine. So okay, this came out 87 or 86? 87. Okay, so I'm born in 74. I don't mind. I'm one of the few people in LA admits my age, or maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm actually in my 90s. But
that would make sense.
When I was like 12 or 13, reading that first issue might have been a tall ask. But I will say, like, knowing it was the first issue of this sort of series that I could then immediately go to issue 2, I thought the first issue was actually pretty fascinating. And I thought, I wish it wasn't so freaking timely, the way the Amazonians were treated and manipulated. And as I read this, I actually was surprised, because I was like, wow, this is pretty bold. This is very much, very forward thinking. And I was thinking like 1980s, where women's rights were at that point, where America was at that point, a very jingoistic era. Reagan makes a cameo in this at one point. And I thought actually that first issue, despite the fact that normally that's not the kind of material I sought out in my comic book reading, it actually did really grab me. And then when we got to sort of Man, I still found myself into it. And then when she maybe went back, that's when I suddenly found myself losing a little interest. So for the first, 8 issues of it, it really grabbed me. And then once we got into the tests, maybe not so much.
Well, the interesting thing that I read just on the back cover of this volume of Volume One, that I guess Perez was only going to do like 6 months just to get it started, and I don't know if that ties into what you were saying before, Jeff. And I do want to let you finish that, but that he had so much fun that I guess he did it for about 5 years. I guess he did 62 issues in all, although at a certain point he only writes it because anybody who's a fan of his work knows that. And in fact, I think some of these issues have some, he does what they call breakdowns, and then they do what they call finishes, which is
that's true. Yeah.
Some really loose penciling, because just, actually doing 22 pages a month was, that's why, a year-long project like Crisis that he probably spent like 3 years on makes sense. But so he did it for a long time. But what was it that you were getting at, Jeff, in terms of what made him actually do it? He felt like the artist you referenced would have done a disservice to the character.
Exactly. Yeah, he thought it would sexualize the character too much, and so he comes on, and Potter had already been hired to write, but it quickly became apparent that George is going to take over the co-plotting. And so Greg Potter, as you see, leaves after issue 2, and then Wein comes on.
And I assume that is why you actually sent me this image from the Spectacular Spider-Man annual, just because of the overly sexualized nature. This is the Black Cat, Felicia Hardy, for our visual audience, and it is just, it basically, her costume looks like it's spray painted on. So I think that was his fear that that's what was going to happen.
Exactly.
Obviously, none of you men have worn spandex, because that is exactly how spandex costumes look. I am sorry. That is.
Hey, why do you make that assumption about me after all this time?
Yeah. Yeah. And you also haven't known me long enough. The amount of it's just, it doesn't look like that when I wear spandex.
Waist down, all Spanx, all the time.
I mean, then you would know that that's exactly how it fits. It's not a spray paint.
Well, it's not even just that. It's also in that frame Christian showed, right? Her butt's like, it felt like 90% of the frame, so there's.
Well, I did zoom in, and Jeff didn't send it to me that way. That just is what happened.
No, but even that one frame, though, it took up a lot of the frame.
Yeah. It did take up a lot of the frame. No, you're right.
But beyond sexuality, like, it's very similar to the costume that the pilot that you sent us to watch.
Yeah, which we will definitely talk about. The
but I do like that they
Wonder Woman television pilot. Yes.
Well, what's amazing is, like, especially with how Wonder Woman has been portrayed in media, with the Grecian skirt, as opposed to 2011 she was wearing pants, and this is the 80s was when a lot of the women started to forego. Like, I was doing a lot of research for Stranger Things on Phoenix, because I'm going to dress up as Phoenix for Comic-Con, and it was the original Phoenix outfit was a dress, and it's like, when did it transition from being the superheroes were wearing dresses to the superhero ladies were wearing kind of full body suits that they could kind of move around in. So I appreciate that, because I'm like, I can't fight in a skirt. You're going to see my panties. That's not cute.
Right. I think that was not to go down the rabbit hole, but when Jean Grey recently reverted to the Marvel Girl costume where she had the skirt again, you're like, I mean, I think it was proven that that was completely impractical. And we'll just say that that's the reason why I haven't read any of those stories, but just the lack of interest, really.
Yeah, but it's interesting how, it used to be even more sexualized with, showing a lot of skin, and we're seeing it with, what was that movie? The Snyderverse Amazons versus the Amazonian Amazons from the Patty Jenkins versions. They're still wearing skirts, but how much skin are they showing? So when you see stuff in comic books that are tight to the female form, I'm like, at least they're wearing a suit that they can move around in that's actually functional. And then we're getting more and more utilitarian as, the times are changing and as our superheroes are changing. So it's just a mark on where we're at with sexuality versus function, form versus function in female superheroes in particular.
Sorry, Kate, about that.
Go for it. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, it's interesting because even when you watch, like, I guess it was Justice League, the footage that Snyder did, there are scenes of Gal Gadot walking around in pants that are more sexualized than any of the scenes of her in a skirt in the Patty Jenkins Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
And so it goes, beyond just costume. It's the gaze, it's the angles, it's, moments when you can truly sort of feel like there's a male gaze going on. I remember studying that 30 years ago in college, like the idea of like who is controlling the image. And so even with the drawing here, and that was something I actually, in terms of the 80s of it all, and there are moments in the series when Wonder Woman's like naked and being reborn. It felt like it handled it right. It felt artistic rather than sort of, I don't know,
gratuitous.
Gratuitous, better word than stalkish.
Yeah, it isn't like the '90s way that I think first of all, of course, the nudity is obscured, but just for the fact that they would have it for various storytelling reasons. Well, Kate, I know that it was a bit of a slog for you, but I do want to know what your takeaways were from the storyline that you did read, which, it does begin with this story where she has to basically, defeat not only the American military, but also Ares. And, this is, I think everything that I read in these 14 issues, I've said this to, I think, each of you. If they could have borrowed any of these themes instead of what they did for Wonder Woman 1984, we'd be better off for it. But what were your takeaways? There's plenty of room to talk about the bad, but were there things that you found in here that you thought were surprising in a good way for stories that were told at this point in the 80s? And what were some of your just takeaways in general?
I had a really hard time. And I am the person that sees good in everything. You know me. And I had a really hard time with this one. I had a hard time seeing the good in it, honestly. I just could not get past how dense it was and how much they had to explain things. Whereas, I felt like reading it, like in comparison to something like Year One, like they didn't really let the art speak for itself. They kind of had to explain all of the art. There was so much lore behind it. And it was, they had to explain all of the Greek stuff, and they had to explain all of the gods, and they had to explain all the things. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm going to kill myself. But they did treat the women in the story with a sense of dignity and honor, and a sense of, that they had agency in their own story, which I really appreciate, which wasn't present a lot of the time in the live action stuff that was happening. And it barely even happened throughout. And in the 90s was a whole different turn of events. So I guess the good thing is I appreciated how they had control over the story. And if they took anything from this story instead of, I have a whole thing on why Wonder Woman 84 could have worked better. I don't think they understood the theme that they wanted. I think they had 4 themes running at the same time, where at least this theme, because they were starting a new series and they were starting a new track, this theme was pretty clear, or the themes that they chose were really clear, and they were embodied by all the characters. Each character kind of had a running theme, and when they butted against each other and has caused friction, that was the conflict. It was a conflict of belief instead of a conflict of action, which I appreciate. And it wasn't present. It's not present in the kind of reimagining of these works from the DC side of it, at least. I don't think. The live action stuff is a little bit male gaze heavy, and they don't really know what they have to work with, which is weird because Patty Jenkins is such a brilliant filmmaker, and she did such a great job with the first one until the third act. When Ares comes in. And I thought that, having not had a lot of contact with Ares except for that movie, Ares was great in the comic. Like, I actually had a better appreciation for the main villain from the first, and I know it was about Wonder Woman 84 was this whole thing, but I wish they would have brought in that he was an actual god in this one, as opposed to the first Wonder Woman film didn't really. He was just a guy. Like he was a guy. It was like it was a god trapped in a guy's body, but it was like it's still like, he didn't feel like a god. He didn't feel like he had like this gravitas about him. Whereas in the comic, he's like yay tall, and I'm just like, I feel it, bro. Like I get you.
Like, when we way back in 2017 when we discussed Wonder Woman on my personal podcast, the Blackcast, BLADTCAST, thank you very much. That was the Ares really was for me the weakest part of the movie. I thought she was great, and they sort of built it up, and I did find it. I agree with you that I found it to be much stronger here. So Jeff, and I might boot you out again if only to return, to return. But,
hashtag protect Jeff at all costs.
We should. But
Team Jeff.
In terms of, I had asked you before we started. So you read this when it was first published.
Right.
How did it measure up to you? Month to month compared to. I know that you read a lot of Marvel and DC at that time. So were you? Did it grab you right away? Did you have to kind of warm up to it? Were you? Did you appreciate this new take on the character?
So to everyone's points, there were issues that I was bored and I did not read it every month. I would miss an issue here and there. I'd pick up the next issue. Sometimes the covers would really draw me in, and then the stories would be not as exciting as the covers presented. But interestingly, Perez said that he was very much influenced by Simonson's Thor. So he's definitely going for that vibe here.
Yeah.
But contrast it with what John Byrne was doing on Superman at the time, which is very action heavy. He was going for like 6 panels per page versus 12. That's definitely a Perezism, as you know from Crisis Christian and or just from his Marvel stuff where he draws very dense pages. So the one thing I wanted to mention about the Ares angle, what did everyone think about the origin here versus in the movie, where she is made wholly from clay and not the spawn of Zeus and her mother?
I was fine with it, and I thought it worked. I'm not so married to one explanation or the other. You know what I mean? I think that this was interesting. It sort of adds a layer of like, oh, that's interesting. Let's try to unravel that at some point, as I'm reading along. What did you think about that, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's always fun sort of seeing, I don't know, old school kind of like Greek gods, biblical roots, like the whole sort of melange they throw in there. And I don't think I found myself necessarily gravitating towards one origin versus the other. I think it worked here. And again, I thought that the first couple issues, or really the first issue with the whole origin of, more so than just Wonder Woman, but really the balance of power. Again, I was pretty surprised how into that I was, and maybe it is, a product of the last 2 weeks in this country, without turning this into a Handmaid's Tale discussion. But I thought, it was pretty powerful. And this idea of Wonder Woman constantly trying to figure out who she is, what her purpose is, I thought the origin fed nicely into that. It also spoke to, I'll hold off on that because I'm not sure if we were going to talk about characters later, because I had some thoughts on the character and the voice of Wonder Woman, but I'll hold off on that.
We can talk about that later.
Yeah.
And Kate, again, we understand that it was a bit of a slog, as we can say. But what did you think about the sort of, the explanation we got for her backstory? And do you feel that it worked? And in a moment, we'll talk about another backstory of this character. But what did you think about sort of her beginnings from clay and, her mother's backstory? And, I mean, there's just this backstory that it's in the 5 issues you mentioned, but they really explored in later issues that what Heracles basically just abused all the women on this island.
Oh my God!
And thousands of years ago, and they don't, they don't make light of it in any way. But I was very surprised. I'm like, comic books are for kids, right?
Yeah.
For the most part. And I think that it's an important part of the storytelling, and I was just surprised that it was in there, you know. So what did you think sort of about the, you know, getting an origin for Wonder Woman in these few issues?
I mean, I think in an origin story, especially like, you know, a lot of the stories that we have been reading in this book club are reimaginings of these characters. I don't think we didn't go back to the 40s and the 50s for reasons. We're sticking with 80s and for the most part, or like, you know, the reimaginings of a character that had already been created.
Sure.
Batman was like that. Moon Knight that we read was like that. You know, The Way of the Weird is kind of an origin story for like where we started. Yeah. But you kind of, when you reimagine a character, it's nice to be like, okay, what is another place that this character could have been born from or imagined, instead of them just being plopped into a world. And, you know, it took a very, you know, in a Greek story, it took a very biblical turn. I mean, Adam was like formed from clay in a way. And it was, you know, they took a very biblical origin and applied it to a female hero. And so I thought that was a clever, creative way, as opposed to her being kind of the daughter of a god, and so a demigod in a way, like Heracles. I think it was nice to have her. There's something about the formation of clay that you are a blank slate and you are what you create yourself to be. That, you know, you're not, you know, because you're not the product of parentage. You can't really put in like you are the, you know, you have your father's blood in you, or you have your family to, you know, back you. You are a blank slate, and you have your clan and you have your tribe, but you're kind of autonomous. And I think that autonomy was important for this version of Diana. And that kind of not being beholden in a way. Even though she was raised in Themyscira, she was raised by these people. She's not born of these people. Mm-hmm. Especially in a time where, you know, it was post baby boom, and it was all of after the baby boomers had their kids, and people were kind of asking the question of just like, where do you come from, and how much does that affect who you are and what is expected of you. So I definitely think that was a part of, you know, what if we have a hero that has no parentage.
Although, wasn't her mother like, I'm trying to remember, she was almost like haunted by this like yearning for motherhood, which dovetails nicely into something we covered recently, which is Wanda. In Doctor Strange and WandaVision, you know, and there is something to be said there too, because that dynamic with her mom, which I also thought was interesting in the movies. Yeah. You know, that idea of like, okay, like a larger destiny versus something that's immensely relatable for all of us, making our parents proud.
Wanting to have it. And in another biblical story, it's you know, Sarah versus oh God, what is it? Oh God, what are the two brothers? One is the son of Sarah, and one of them couldn't have kids. So it's, you know, lie with the handmaiden and, you know, have a child of her because I can't have a kid, and then she gets pregnant.
Jacob Esau?
I think
I wish I could be helpful.
Geekscape.
Welcome to Greek theology with Geekscape theology.
I think it was and then he ends up killing the brother.
I'm not my brother's keeper. Oh, is it Abraham and
Well, you know what? It's many stories of the Bible, honestly.
Yes.
I mean, it's Joseph with his siblings throwing him in the pit.
There's a lot of siblings who try to kill each other.
Oh, yeah. No. I mean, and now I have two sons, and I'm like, oh, that's why. There it is.
But it's the kind of like that woman in the Bible was just like, I can't be a mother. So but that's all I want.
Right. And then
even when she does,
Yitzhak and laughter is the name Laughter because I can't believe I'm pregnant. And they apparently were laughing about it, so thus the kid's name is Yitzhak, Isaac. Oh yeah, no, they did me good in Hebrew school.
Isaac and Ishmael. There we go. Found it. Abraham was the father.
Done.
So I feel like this was a good reinterpretation. You know, nice reset on a character, which Jeff referenced the John Byrne Man of Steel, which I did read a few issues of at the time when he did that, just because I was sort of intrigued. I hadn't really read much Superman before or since, to be honest, but I was definitely intrigued by sort of this approach towards, resetting, continuity.
What year was that, Christian?
The Man of Steel was like 86.
Okay, so right, like
yeah,
right
it's around the
before
same.
this.
It's all after Crisis.
Okay.
And
Gotcha. Thank you.
yeah. But as sort of a sort of fun yet painful diversion, I wanted to take a moment to talk about a bad reimagining of the character because it is so infamous, and it is the unaired but easily found on the internet NBC pilot for Wonder Woman series starring Adrian Padalecki, who was well known from her work as Mockingbird on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and she's also on the Orville now. But, it's a Stephen Bochco production. And I mean, it is, when you think of all the bad superhero stuff you've seen, for that to, that would be on the Mount Rushmore of bad superheroing. It's clearly missing the point. I think well-intentioned, but sometimes you can't be sure. Kate, had you ever seen that before? The Wonder Woman pilot?
This kind of shit makes me really angry as a female filmmaker.
Yeah.
But I get where it comes from because I watched it. And it's really irritating when a character is reimagined this way. And it's almost like to prove that these characters there's an email that went out years ago at Sony that female superheroes couldn't lead a franchise. And it's kind of been like they named the two that were failed and then use that as an excuse to never make them again. I think this was a good call by Warner Brothers to not pick up the pilot because sure. I think it would have put this character back way too far. And we wouldn't have gotten Patty Jenkins' reimagining and we wouldn't have gotten Gal Gadot's version. So I think it was a good call by the studio. And I rarely say that. What I do know, because I looked it up, it was done in 2011.
Yes.
Iron Man had just come out in 2008. And there's been, up until that point on networks like the CW, ABC, there had been a push, and there had been a push up until from the early 2000s up to the mid 2010s, to reimagine old stories in a modern context. 2003, we got Tarzan in a modern context with the amazing Lucy Lawless. That was the only thing that show gave us. We got a reimagining of Beauty and the Beast, which was the 80s Beauty and the Beast, not the old Beauty and the Beast.
The Linda Hamilton, Ron Perlman.
Yes. Yeah. And so we've gotten these reimaginings, but what they did to reimagine this one was Diana Prince was a celebrity. She was running basically the Themyscira Industries, very similar to Stark being out and running Stark Industries. So I think they were trying to take a female superhero and put Stark on top of her. Also starring Carrie Elwes, which is a really nice surprise. I was like, oh, okay, cool, good flex.
Yeah, I know. I would have loved for him to. The only shame is that he wasn't able to draw a weekly salary from a network series, because if there's somebody who deserves to have the riches that maybe he doesn't have, it would be Carrie Elwes. But anyway, sorry, finish your thought.
But in the context of the stuff that we were getting on those types of networks at the time, they were the only people that were willing to do and had the budget for basic superhero or they could only do super strong type of superheroes because they didn't really have the budget for anything else. And you could tell. So you could only do super strong and then let's talk about it in our penthouse for a bit because this is the set that we have. So from a filmmaker's perspective, I understand why. It was just the wrong character and the wrong base. They were trying to reimagine her as the Stark version for DC. But this was before Marvel TV really kind of had its rise. This is before Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. This is before, Netflix got in the game, and this is before everything else. So, I mean, good for the old college try. I'm glad they took a chance, but I'm also glad they didn't greenlight the whole series because it was bad.
What
was your takeaway from the Wonder Woman pilot, Eric?
Yeah, well, it's funny because you shared this with us, but we've actually at my school we've used the pilot script and then and then Patty Jenkins' movie as like it's kind of like an assignment that branches over a couple different classes in terms of how the progression of a story and even the idea of something that admittedly is a failed version of it. So sort of talk about, okay, what went wrong here? Like it's like a case study basically. And so I was overly familiar with this when you shared it, and I was a huge fan of Friday Night Lights. So Adrienne Palicki in my mind is like a totally legit actress, and yet you wouldn't know it from this. This was actually, it wasn't Stephen Bochco, it was David E. Kelly.
Yeah. You know what? You're right. I actually misspoke. It's in the sense in which I threw the name out there. It actually doesn't matter.
Yes,
you know what I mean. But because it is name attached that makes no sense that it was attached.
Right. Well, and also too, it was funny because LA Law is the bridge between those two.
Yeah.
Stephen Bochco was the first, was one of the creators and showrunners, and then.
But Stephen Bochco at least gave us Cop Rock. So
yes, he did, which I have a copy of too. If you ever need it, Christian.
I cannot believe you know Cop Rock.
Who doesn't know Cop Rock? It's
when you're our age, you all knew about Cop Rock.
The only reason I know about it is because John Oliver made fun of it like 2 years ago.
I'm proud of you for knowing it, though, Kaitlin.
Yeah,
I'm proud of me too. And then I realized how pervasive it was.
Mention in the chat. Let us know in the chat if you're proud that.
I've also realized I probably have the right friends. This is the moment when I realized I had found. Like, do you ever have that moment where you're looking around the room? It's like, these are my people.
I met someone who worked on Cop Rock, and we geeked out about it for like a half hour, and then a day or two later, our mutual friend handed me a disc, and it was a couple of discs. Both with Cop Rock material, one the original pilot, the other outtakes.
Isn't that the show where they sang about, like, there was a pedophile in a park that sang about selling babies and shit?
Oh, that song might have left my brain at some point, thankfully. But
I think that most people know it in the sense of the pilot because most people didn't watch.
That's as far,
Yeah, right.
But Eric, I want you to finish. I want you to finish.
Sorry.
No. I did this. I brought up.
No. This is all on Christian, and he would.
Eric and I can go off forever. We just go.
Believe me, we'll do a episode by episode Cop Rock after show at some point. Don't worry.
That's a hard pass.
Or we make the Cop Rock graphic novel.
Yes,
I'm just throwing that out there.
All right, I love it.
So anyway, this one too. It's such a mess. It takes itself weirdly seriously at times, not seriously enough at other. Yeah. She has 2 secret identities. Remember, she runs that company, and then she has this other secret identity of like just regular Diana. Like, it is crazy that this thing had someone as smart as David E. Kelly attached. And sometimes it is a matter of just like David E. Kelly, bounced back huge with Big Little Lies or Little Big Lies. I always call it the wrong thing. Which was terrific.
Pretty Little Big Liars.
Pretty Little Thinning.
I think I'm right. Yeah. Pretty Little Big Liars in the building. I think.
Gossiping about
Pretty
a girl.
Little Big Liars.
I might be wrong though.
And so he that was a terrific comic. He also did Mr. Mercedes, which I thought was a really great show based on one of Stephen King's book series. But in the end of it all, it's like all those things that drew people to Wonder Woman. It's handled so indelicately, so it doesn't feel organic. It feels very forced. It feels like it's trying to sort of say, "Oh no, we get her." It's like, no, it feels like mansplaining all over the place. It's really it's a hell of a thing. If you haven't watched it, please do yourself that favor. And watch
definitely. It's easily found. It used to be on YouTube. You have to dig a little deeper. But it's out there.
Daily Motion, I think,
and it definitely makes you appreciate the at least the first Patty Jenkins movie, and sort of telling that. Jeff, have you had time to ever watch that 2011 Wonder Woman pilot?
No, I'd seen bits of it, but they obviously saw that this guy did Felicity. Felicity was a show with a woman. Here's a show with a woman. He can do this too. And it was not a good pairing, I think. But I couldn't watch it last night. I just finished Stranger Things, and this would have been like drinking a glass of pickle juice after having a glass of Woodford. I couldn't bring myself to do that.
I do love a nice pickle juice.
Yeah, I need it.
I do love a pickleback.
And Jeff, I think that what I want to try is something very low tech, and I'll have you reconnect with us just using your cell phone and use the built-in camera there. I know and microphone there, so I can text you the link. And we'll try that. Okay, you got it. So yeah, just do that from your phone. Yeah, thank you. And my apologies for the static there, but I bring Jeff on as a voice of knowledge on these things. But what a great time to remind everyone that he is an author of The Last Battle of the Revolution, available now on Amazon. Look, there's his name.
Oh,
and his comic book, the Alternate, which he's been working on for a few years. You can find the issues on Comixology. One of the ways we started speaking with each other was because he asked if I would be interested in reading his comic book, because he was familiar with my work from a radio show that I was on. So, but check out his comic, The Alternate. Maybe I'll let him give the hard sell at the end of the show. Yeah, I think that I wanted to make sure that we talked a little bit about that. So
what did
Kaitlin,
you think?
What's that?
Of the pilot. What did you think of the pilot?
What did I think of it?
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's glorious. I
just didn't like that she was wearing pants. I was like, all right, flex, awesome, cool.
But
yeah,
I mean,
that top,
it's so misguided.
Erotic
so
thriller
feel.
You know, for me especially, I'm just like, this is a Sparrows bra. This is not fun.
Look, you see a lot of times
that's the real battle of the show.
People who adapt properties that they have no familiarity with, no interest in. And I don't know that David E. Kelley ever thought that this would go to series. You know, I'd like to know, like, what was his development deal at the time? Did he just have to shoot a pilot so that he got his money? It might be as simple as that. Did he not want it to go? Because that would answer a lot of questions.
I mean, I do honestly think it was, you know, that was the at the time, that's what a lot of stuff, that was the tone of a lot of stuff that was being made. And I just think we forget about that when we're, you know, in this, like, you know, we've got Stranger Things, which the finale was 2.5 hours long. And, you know, we're going back and making fun of like 10 years ago. Like that was 10 years ago. And like filmmaking and audiences, like Netflix was barely a cool thing back then. Like Netflix was still 10 years ago was barely making their own content. Like,
no, I mean it was a stack of DVDs that you didn't get around to watching because you just didn't have the thing you actually wanted in your house. That's what Netflix was at that point.
I think we forget, like, and that's why, what was that show that I watched, Inhumans, was so interesting, because I'm like, it's like hearkening back to a time of television to 13-year-olds when I was like, it's like early 2003 when there was nothing else to watch on cable. And like now there's everything to watch, and the quality is so high that when you have a low quality product like that, it's like, how did this even get past? But everything was that quality back then.
Yeah, I mean, there's something about, you know, network TV that has a very specific look to it. What did you want to say, Jeff?
Oh, I was going to say that DC and Warner Brothers at that time, they also tried a like insurance superhero show where there was like an insurance company that did claims for damages to superhero, like caused by superhero battles.
Powerless.
Powerless. Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
that wasn't that many years ago.
That's true.
It was a comedy.
Right. Yeah. Maybe that was closer to 2015 or 16.
That sounds.
Yeah, right, but still, it's there's a lot of misfires, and it's interesting because while I'm not a fan of the CW Arrowverse, Flashverse stuff that they do, it has obviously proven to be very successful for some of these franchises, you know. And I mean that's you think about how many hours of Barry Allen there's been on television, you know, it's very impressive.
Well, even Smallville was right around this time, right? I'm trying to remember.
Well, Smallville ended by this point, but yeah, it's not too far off.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, I think that from network television, the approach is always, how can we tell superhero stories without spending superhero money on them? I mean, you know, Eric and I have a bit of an affinity for the Bill Bixby Incredible Hulk show, but it is not a superhero show at all. No. It's just a couple minutes of him turning green and, you know, like picking up a car and throwing it
in slow motion. Yeah, it's basically The Fugitive with body.
Yeah, that's true. But Jeff, how do you feel? So we were talking a little bit about, in terms of you reading this, in terms of thinking back on this run, do you think that this is a little bit inaccessible for more modern comic book readers, as Kaitlin found?
Like
Do you
me.
think that there are better entry points for this character that are more recent?
I've actually had to struggle with this several times because I've had adults ask me what a good point is for Wonder Woman, and I can't find a better one.
Okay.
So I think they struggle with this. The New 52 relaunch, which I haven't read much of, but they introduced this concept that Zeus was Diana, I am your father, which was a terrible. I hate the thing where Zeus is her dad.
Did he Darth Vader her?
It was sort of like the mother, Hippolyta, kept it a secret from her.
Yeah, Hippolyta.
Hippolyta, thank you. And they
not to be that person.
No, it's fine. No, I'm just good. And they so it was a reveal.
Got it.
Okay.
So I much preferred. It was weird, almost like an anti-feminist move to remove the made from clay from the hands of a woman and have to introduce a male figure into it. Just felt against the initial. And by the way, the
introduce or introduce.
Exactly.
Oh snap!
And done.
The origin that we saw in this was literally the 1940s origin, the 1940 origin.
Oh,
now,
interesting.
They told it in 2 pages in 1940, but Perez and the writer here added almost nothing to it in terms of new layers. So also in the first page, there's a caveman who bludgeons a pregnant cave woman to death.
Oh, that's right.
That's the Diana is the baby, the spirit of the baby that goes into Gaia's womb.
Oh, I see. That's
so the cave baby.
Yeah,
cave baby.
Mother. Yeah. So she gets to be queen because
maybe
she was.
That's why I had trouble with it, because it starts off with bludgeoning a pregnant woman.
It's not a great start.
I totally forgot about that.
And to that point, very weird to read as a 14-year-old boy. It was a very odd introduction.
Yeah.
And Perez.
Do you think that because I'm a new comic book reader, and you guys have, not saying you've been around the block, but you've been fans since you were kids.
Yeah.
And so you kind of came up with this culture. Do you think that, and especially like watching Stranger Things, and it's like, I'm like, I would never let my kids out of the house. Like, you are staying in your room forever. Right. And it's like, people who grew up in the 80s are like, oh yeah, we would just go ride our bikes and like be home when the street lamps come on. Was there more of a trust in readership back then of like, we could throw these themes at kids and adults? Because it's weird to kind of hear like, oh yeah, these were for kids, but it's like Star Wars is technically for kids, and there's like murder and like all of that and like maybe an incestuous kiss, or like I don't know what the hell's happening.
Well, to that point, the original Star Wars were PG movies. The prequels were PG-13, and the prequels only robots get shot. Like, especially the first one in Phantom.
But they start off with like, space taxes. And I'm like,
and
what
just to be fair, when the original trilogy came out, PG-13 did not exist as a ratings classification.
That's true.
It didn't. That's absolutely true. But it just speaks something about the level of sophistication. So about comics, like my parents, comics are for kids. I walked into a grocery store, I bought any comic I wanted. If it had a rape scene, it had a rape scene. I mean, my parents never knew.
My parents never would have checked what was in there, but I mean, it was, and look, they were mostly policed by the Comics Code Authority, so there was an actual rating system that, for the most part, but there would definitely be. It was more like mature themes in the sense of just, sort of next level, more intellectual storytelling than you got from anywhere on TV. Yes, I can always point to Chris Claremont's X-Men, but a lot of, those Spider-Man stories, the gang war and things like that, which Jeff and I have just talked about privately just for fun for hours on end.
Because it was 2-dimensional as opposed to like, you were getting gangster movies and like RoboCop, where it's like you were really getting like shootouts on television, and that was when the MPAA like really started to like question it. But like 2-dimensional still felt safer because it was like a little bit distant. It's like reading a novel. But did that change growing up with that influence? Do you think it changed how you view fiction, and that it's okay to talk about these themes as opposed to what YA is considered now, which is very, very tame and romance is a kiss versus like, you know, how far can you take what
but
romance?
YA also includes Twilight. YA includes
That's true.
Hunger Games, which are, you know, pretty barbaric, especially when you talk about it out loud. You don't really think of it that way until you're like, oh yeah, a battle royale.
No,
where kill each other.
Yeah, but for the most part, yeah, I think that you know, Kate, you made the point that the way that we lived as kids, you would basically just sort of be out of the house all day, and your parents expected you to just show up in time for dinner, and you know,
without cell phones, without a way to find us,
without any way to get in touch with you. So
I'm not even a parent. That freaks me.
I mean, I am a parent, and it's so hard to think about now, but it's just sort of the world being such a different place. But at the same time, I think that our content wasn't policed as much either. You know, I mean, it was like,
is it a benefit or a detriment now?
I mean, I think, you know, honestly, I would have to see what kids of similar age, and my son's about to be 7. I was 7 when I really started reading Marvel comics. It'd be interesting to see what he read, and if I also read it, what would I feel? You know, would I feel like they were more juvenile, or are they more sophisticated than we even remembered in some ways? You know,
I'll offer my sons as a case study. They're 14, almost 14 and 11. I think that might be a branch off we do. We was sort of like Stranger Things without the, you know, the mind control stuff.
So that would actually be a really interesting episode if you're willing to throw your kids. In
if we were willing to.
I want to know what they're reading. I want to know what they're thinking about.
Do you think, Eric, to bring it back to Wonder Woman, do you think that it would be a hard sell for your kids to read this same volume that we just read, the George Perez?
Yeah, no, I do. I think.
Yeah,
it's funny as you know, because he has occasionally cameoed in our shows. You know, my older son, like he'll kind of start on a comic, but he won't really see it through. And I don't know if that's a product of so many choices that my guys have in terms of entertainment. Like, you know, for us who grew up 80s, you know, and it sounds like for yourself, Kate, although you said you came to comic books later in life, right?
I came into comic books way late. I was telling Christian this, and Jeff, now you know a lot more about me than you probably expected.
No.
I'm from Los Angeles, which is a car-centric city.
Oh yeah.
There wasn't really a place to like walk to a grocery store and buy a comic. Like, I don't remember seeing any comics in a grocery store. So to have like Christian and you and Eric and Michael be like, oh yeah, and then I just grabbed a comic book in line with my parents.
Yeah.
Like, my parents would never fucking buy me.
There was a spinner rack at, like, we didn't have 7-Eleven where I lived, but if I went to one like by my grandma's, there was a comic book spinner rack there at 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
And at like every grocery store. And
my foray into comics was manga. I used to go to Golden Apple and and they used to have them at like Borders when those were still a thing. There was a whole Japanese
great section of that.
Like I would buy the Shonen Jump and it's just like, and then that got made fun of and I got teased.
Well, so I used to go to a place called Books and Tobaccos, and tobacco's plural, by the way. And
is that what they sold? Is that all they sold?
It was magazines, comics, and a whole
tobaccos,
big selection of cigarettes.
Let's remind everyone that Eric grew up in Oklahoma in 1887. So obviously, it's
when important. I wasn't fighting dysentery.
I think I misspoke. It's a good opportunity to say that Eric grew up during the last battle of the Revolution. By our friend Jeff Winstead, now available.
It's gonna be Taylor Sheridan is writing a story, his next story about
story of my youth.
Well, it's gonna be 1883.
Well, in Delaware, the difference of 1983 and 1883 was just a Taco Bell. That was basically it. And as long as you didn't go, and I don't know if you gents had this experience too growing up, as long as you didn't go to the magazine rack and go to the place where the cardboard was.
Yep.
Because that would hide the adult mags, the nudie mags, the skin mags, as Christian would call it in New York. But as long as I stay away from there,
I refer to them as art publications. But I know what you're saying. Yeah, no, that was the people who ran like the newsstand near me. It was more like I was getting eyed, not to see if I was shoplifting, just to make sure that I stayed away from Hustler. So I appreciate the fact that at Quacky's, old Mr. Quackenbush was making sure that I wasn't trying to run out of there with a stack of nudie books, as we might have called them. So yeah, I think it's I enjoyed the storytelling, but I am so well versed in comics from this era. Like I said, I don't know how I would have responded to it as a kid. Did you, Jeff, stick with this during Perez's run? As I said earlier, I think he did about 62 issues of this.
Yeah, so he drew 24. So he drew 2 years worth. I read that on and off. So something interesting happened where I bought the first couple. I have a younger sister, and she got into comics a few months after me. So she was into the book. So I would buy the book for her, and she would. So that kind of kept me in the book. I probably read more issues of Wonder Woman as like in sequence than any other DC book, actually. So I read it for 200 and some issues, consistently. So yeah, but there were issues here. Particularly, there's an issue in this volume that's mostly text.
Yeah,
I hated that as a kid. Are you kidding me? That's not a comic.
I as a 46-year-old man trying to read 14 issues of this, when I got to that one, I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And
I will be counter. I liked it. I liked that issue.
I liked it as a storytelling technique, but in terms of the time. But one of the things I want to talk about this book being so rooted in the 80s, there's references to the other Princess Diana, which I think is interesting. And we mentioned that President Reagan is in here. There is a lot of things that, definitely stem from, what was current at the time. And, my favorite thing is the professor's daughter, her diary. It's from that issue. She talks about the boy she likes at school and how he looked at me with those Rob Lowe eyes and spoke to me with those Michael J. Fox lips, smiled that Kirk Cameron smile. And I was honestly,
I feel all of this.
Yeah, I know. See,
this was before me, and I'm like, I understand you.
You might want to read her diary entry in there, and it just.
I don't need to. I feel it here.
You feel it, yeah, exactly.
Before Rob Lowe's sex tape, before Kirk Cameron's Bible thumping, and Michael J. Fox. By the way,
we still love him.
Every inch of my heart is his.
Yeah. Exactly.
If she said Tom Cruise's hair, trifecta.
You know what? That's surprising. This was when Cocktail was out. So
Tom Cruise's old teeth before he got him fixed.
But
the snaggle tooth.
It's funny though because the scripting goes to Len Wein, who created the Giant Size X-Men, the all new X-Men. And it's funny because Jeff, I felt like he wrote a teenage girl in the way that Chris Claremont writes a teenage girl, where you're like, I don't know if teenage girl really talks and things like that. But I did love the commitment to he probably went to one of those supermarkets we're referencing and he looked at like Tiger Beat and he's like, well, here's 3 boys that are on the cover. I guess I'll put that in her diary. Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, I kind of appreciate that aspect of it just as an old man. Like it made me, I was sitting there at Dunkin' Donuts and I just like laughed out loud when I read that. And that's why I took like a little screen grab just so that I could read it
that's hilarious.
During the show.
I think that issue also reveals one of the other weird things about the series. So when they rebooted Wonder Woman here, she's dropped into the continuity already in motion. So she's a new character suddenly. Whereas Batman, Superman, Green Lantern, they've been around. They have a history at this point. And so that caused all kinds of chaos in DC's continuity, where she had to be retconned out of being a founding member of Justice League. They had to, the Titans had a character called Wonder Girl. Then they now had to explain how was she inspired by Wonder Woman if there was no Wonder Woman. So a lot of DC had this problem after Crisis where they wanted to reboot everything, but they had no solid plan for doing it. And ironically, they just did it again in 2011 with the new 52. Same problems.
Yeah, but my understanding is that the new 52 was not particularly well received, and they've already kind of reverted back from it, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, what is the big takeaway you think from this? I mean, obviously we chose this, or I chose this at your recommendation because I knew that George Perez was associated with Wonder Woman, and I was glad that oh yeah, Wonder Woman #1 makes the most sense. And there's no denying his ability, and then obviously the problem being his own limitations, that even he knew that he couldn't do a monthly book. 22 pages a month were not for him, because when you put 12 panels on a page, it gets difficult. But what do you think the legacy is of sort of this on the character? I mean, you definitely, and there's a Vulture art, the website Vulture article that Eric sent to me that I read prior to this, and Patty Jenkins even said that obviously some of the original stories influenced her, but she was like, of course, the George Perez. And you can really see in these 14 issues, you see a lot of things represented on the screen by Patty Jenkins in both movies, including, by the way, on the back cover of this book is Cheetah, and Cheetah is in exactly one issue. You get a little bit of Barbara Minerva, but you get Cheetah for one issue, and I assume she comes back at some point. But I was expecting a lot more Cheetah because she was on the back cover.
Yeah, she's such a cool character too, and she just looks cool the way she's done in the comic compared to the movie.
Yeah. So, oh no, yeah. I mean, the movie's very unfortunate.
The lasting impact of Cats, the movie.
Yeah.
We're in a post-Cats world.
But Jeff, yeah, I sort of so I know that this kind of gave you an opportunity to rethink and revisit this a little bit, and you still feel it's the best starting point for the character, and I guess not. You had mentioned to me once that there's a newer version of Wonder Woman where I think she wears a leather jacket and rides a motorcycle, but I think that that might not be the one for people to start with.
No, this still remains, despite its denseness, although I think it is very epic. You have to give it that. It's very dense. But
sure.
Despite that, it still remains the most true to the character entry point for most people. I've recommended it a couple times because I just can't find anything else that works as well. And I think the art obviously is beautiful. Once Perez leaves, they bring in some good artists, but something is lost even when he's still writing it. And it takes a good few issues before the next. Well, actually, John Byrne takes over with issue 101 and does a pretty good run on the character at that point. So.
Oh, I didn't even realize that Byrne had a run on this. That's interesting.
Yeah, it was a few years post issue 100.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, we appreciate you sort of holding our hand through this. And as I've mentioned numerous times, Jeff's book, The Last Battle of the Revolution, is available. I think the best way to find it is on Amazon. But Jeff, take a quick moment and tell people about your series, The Alternate, which I believe all issues are available in Comixology, unless I'm telling tales out of school.
No, that's true. There's 6 issues now. It is a superhero book about a guy who is the only superhero on his earth. He's a celebrity. He does Tonight Show appearances. He's having a great life until he gets transported to an alternate dimension that has a ton of other superheroes and another version of himself that is more heroic, more smarter, better looking, essentially just as better in every way. And so that's where the story takes off.
It's like when I met Christian.
Yes, you're better looking and stronger and better in every way. Yes, obviously. And it's been a while since issue 6. That's all I'm going to say, Jeff. Just
it is coming to print soon-ish. So
okay,
we've heard that before.
Why are you bringing Jeff on just to give him a hard time?
Really?
I'm also bringing him on to let people know about the Last Battle of the Revolution and, of course, The Alternate. Well, Jeff, thank you so much. And people want to continue the conversation with you. I believe they can find you on Twitter at Jeff Winstead.
Simply enough, yes.
Yes. And I was mentioning earlier that some of our earliest interactions were you just wrote to me because you heard me on a radio show that I worked on, and you were like, hey, do you want to read my comic on Comixology? I'll send you a code for free. And my answer was, what's Comixology? So, yeah. And then, one day we will still do that show where we compare Secret Wars, the original Secret Wars, and Crisis. I have a new outlook on that thanks to the volume that you sent me.
Awesome.
And Kaitlin, where can people keep in touch with you if they want to talk Stranger Things?
And everything else that I freaking like, but mostly.
But I know right now that I feel like that's what's bursting, and
it's bursting out of every part of me. I love that show. It's great.
Still in the middle of season 2, but so no spoilers. But
no spoilers. But I will say that season 4 rocked my socks. You can keep in touch with me on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Cornellable, CORNELLABLE.
And Eric, where can people find you?
Well, you can find me roaming the streets of Burbank, always looking for another gun store and Taco Bell to call my own.
That's how I
by
find
the way,
you,
to
usually.
be fair, we have a lot of gun stores, but more Taco Bells.
Yeah.
We have
actually
a lot.
I don't know if that's true anymore. I think unfortunately Aries has been winning out. So
when it's free taco day, I go to all of them. So I know,
including the gun stores.
There's 4. I go to the gun stores actually. Hey, you giving anything free?
And if you don't want to see me in person, which I totally get, Count Eric Connor over on Instagram and Twitter, TikTok. If I think I'm just too old. If I register, I'm just gonna be added to a different registry I don't want to be on. So I stay away.
And if people want to find your movie,
Other Voices is hanging out on Amazon, the other Amazon. And it is a documentary that I don't know, unfortunately, again, some of the stuff I wish wasn't so timely, and yet there it is, story of friendship across the unlikely border of Palestine and Israel, and yet these friendships prevail and they are searching for a peace. Well, pretty good theme for us all, I suppose.
And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Christian DMZ, and on my YouTube channel, Blackcast, BLADTCAST. You can find a weekly show that we do called Marvel Movie Talk. Eric and I are on most weeks. Kaitlin is on when she's available, but there's
which is this Wednesday.
This Wednesday, well, we'll be talking about Ms. Marvel, episode 5, as we get close to the end of that series. But in any case, I will hopefully see you all here on the Geekscape Book Club next month, where on August 14th, which is a Sunday, we will be doing...
No way.
What, it's a Sunday?
It's my birthday.
Well, then hopefully you didn't have anything fun planned, because we would like to have you join us while we speak about Volume 1 of the 2014 Kamal Khan Ms. Marvel, which I have never read, and I'm very excited to dive into after the show. And I will already tell you now that the month after that, we're going to do some Thor stuff to tie into Love and Thunder, which... once you see it, you'll be able to see a special episode where Eric and I talk about that movie, all on the Blackcast YouTube channel, BLADTCAST. In any case, Larry asked this question so long ago. I don't have an answer to it. I don't know if any of you do. But Larry Potter asked, what do you think of the Justice League animated series Wonder Woman voiced by Susan Eisenberg, Paradise Lost, as a guideline for an Ares plot for a live movie? My understanding would be that I would be surprised if they went back to Ares at least anytime soon.
Yeah.
I don't know how many Gal Gadot Wonder Woman movies you have in you, and I feel like they want to sort of move on from that. Is that something you're familiar with, Jeff, that animated series?
Yeah, the series definitely. I don't remember that particular episode, but yeah, almost everything in that series is well done. So
yeah.
Anything they want to adapt from that's okay with me.
Well, it's funny you bring that up, because that was actually something we were talking about when we were kids in the 80s, getting these comics. Meanwhile, the animated versions of these shows, like the Justice League, if you watch it now, it's listen, my kids, one of my sons hate watches them for fun and mocks them. And unfortunately, they do not hold up. And then I think about Justice
Wait,
League
does he
Unlimited.
hate watch animated X-Men? Because
No. You got to think back. Think
You're talking about
the Super Friends. Super
You're
Friends.
talking about the Super Friends. Oh, yeah.
Sorry. Super
on
Friends.
your
No.
Yeah.
80s super or 70s really, right?
That's
I mean,
70s. Yeah, with the Wonder Twins and
and Marvin the Intern, Wonder Mutt. Yeah, there were dark times.
And let's not forget the Fantastic Four series with Herbie the Robot instead of Human Torch because they were afraid kids would light themselves on fire. Yeah, no, what the three of us grew up with was such garbage, but I relished that garbage because it was my kind of garbage.
Yeah. No, I watched it all, but
yeah,
but I mean, it wasn't
what place for everything.
What we were given in the 90s in terms of X-Men, Spider-Man, Superman, Batman, the animated series. I mean, there's others, but those four are sort of like the gold standard. And then there is so much more that you can find, I mean, when DC had their own app, which now it kind of all got rolled into HBO Max, they had all of that stuff. And it was, they didn't actually have a ton of stuff, but they had so much animated content. And I believe a lot of it you can now find on HBO Max. So thank you, Larry, for joining us and anybody else who joined us. And of course, for those checking out the the audio only version, but we should do an animated version of our conversation. But that is all the time we have for this month. But thank you so much. We'll see you all talking Ms. Marvel on August 14th. But until then, thank you. And